Hello, everyone. Welcome to NWE War Reports, and this is the 18th of April 2023 frontline update for the Russo-Ukrainian War. There is a lot of very big news to talk about today. Some both good and bad news for both sides in the conflict, so make sure you stay tuned to that. First, we're going to start off with the gains that Russia has made inside of BAKHMUT, the situation in BAKHMUT overall, how badly it's deteriorating. Then we're going to talk about Ukrainian counterattack. And then we have images of the first Ukrainian Leopard 2 tank that has been lost in the war. It has been lost already, along with several other vehicles. So we're going to get to that, and we're going to show you guys that a little bit later in the video, along with a general frontline update. So first of all, zooming in on the area of Bakhmut, there have been gains in multiple parts of town. As you can see here, this stuff that's marked here is the ground that had previously fallen to the Russians. For the most part, their progress has slowed down somewhat, but there still have been gains both in this northern part of town here as well as the southern part of town that the Ukrainians still occupy across the railroad. So, in terms of the northern parts, this front line has been roughly not stabilized per se, but it is evened out. I guess you could say the Russians have continued to push the Ukrainians to the south in this direction here, capturing some of this territory, as well as moving into these streets here and getting rid of these salients. So essentially what we're looking at here in terms of the gains is something a little like this, with this corner block falling into Russian hands, and then these streets here falling into Russian hands as well. And this is, give or take, it's not 100% accurate. There's probably still fighting going on inside of some of these areas, but this is more or less the area that Russia either now controls or is advancing into. In terms of the southern parts of town, the Russians have moved in and captured a bit of territory in this area here. It's not all of it, but it does appear to be most of it. The news that came with this actually came from Suryak Maps. He is suggesting that the Ukrainians are actively retreating from here. He had mentioned that 2 days ago. There hasn't yet been an update, so I'm assuming the situation is something a little more like this, with slightly less certainty than we have for this ground up here being under Russian control. So the next time you guys will see this, I will correct these lines, get rid of these yellow lines, move this into Russian controlled territory. We should have confirmation on this territory by that point. Pretty good confirmation on who that territory belongs to, and then any more updates from there. So just general Bakhmut information. There has been an increase in artillery and bombings by both sides, and this is a dramatic increase in bombing. The Russians appear to be dropping FAB 500, probably glide bombs. Now, those of you guys that don't know what this is, it's essentially you take a standard bomb that's dropped from an aircraft, a standard unguided bomb, and then you attach a kit to it, which essentially imagine these switchblade drones that you've seen. There's wings on that. It's a bracket that attaches to the bomb. The wings shoot out, so the bomb then has wings, and it allows it to glide for a pretty significant distance. I'm not exactly sure how far that distance is, but it's far enough to where Russian fighter bombers like Su-35s or even Su-27s and just typical fighter aircraft that can carry these things, they can sit safely, 30, 40 kilometers behind the front line, release these bombs. They'll glide all the way to the target, and I believe they're laser designated. So they have been pretty accurate, and some of them have been pretty devastating. I've seen some recent footage of some massive craters that are being created by these bombs. At the same time, the Ukrainians are also doing some damage to the Russians now inside of Bakhmut. It seems like both sides have kind of taken the gloves off here. Some sources or some mill bloggers like Military Summary Channel is assuming that the civilians are out of the city now, so both sides are kind of not letting up on each other. That's certainly possible. I think that in this case, the Ukrainians might have planted explosives. There is a video out now of this building right here. This is, it says it's a youth center. It's a cultural center of some kind. It's a large museum-like structure. It's just completely been obliterated, likely by the Ukrainian side, because this is now the Russian side that controls it. So, um, very big and heavy damage being done to the city now, to these parts of the city that have to this point, probably experienced some artillery barrages, but it is mostly intact. But it definitely seems like it won't be after this fight. Now, the big news in terms of a Ukrainian counterattack. So we have word of a Ukrainian counterattack, and that has taken place on the flank here south of Chasiv Yar. As you can see right here in the middle of the screen, this is a rock quarry right here that the Russians have that they captured and have occupied for some time. This was originally captured by Wagner troops. They swapped out at some point, and this is now being held by paratroopers. But the Ukrainians counterattacked today and managed to force the Russians completely back to the canal that runs right through here. So I guess we'll do blue, even though we do blue for Ukrainians, but just so you guys can see where it is. This is a canal, the Trans-Donbass Canal or something like that, the Donbass Canal. Maybe it's not trans, I don't know, but that runs through here. The Ukrainians have moved back and pushed the Russians back, almost across the entirety of this canal area. So you're looking at something like a Ukrainian captured ground being this here. And I'm unsure of everything south of this tree line here, but it is a pretty significant piece of land. And it's definitely a big deal for the Ukrainian side, because this makes the Donbass Ukrainian defensive line much, much stronger. It reduces risk to places like Konstantinivka. Had the Russians continued to hold on to this and capture Bakhmut, let's say Bakhmut falls in a couple weeks, couple days. Who knows, but whenever it does, if the Russians have this bridgehead across the canal, they could rapidly transfer their forces to this area and then start attacking in basically every different direction, potentially putting both Toretsk and Konstantinivka under threat. They weren't going to do that while they were dealing with this battle in Bakhmut, but should Bakhmut fall, that definitely becomes an option, and it gives them an opportunity to surround Chasiv Yar as well to the north here. So at the current time, they have lost all of those opportunities. All right, so that is pretty big news. The next big news is that both presidents, actually President Zelensky and President Vladimir Putin, visited their troops on the front lines, or pretty close to the front lines for Zelensky, not as close for Putin, but both presidents were in the Donbass yesterday, so that's pretty big news. We'll get to exactly where they were in just a moment. So I'm guessing you guys probably want to know about the Leopard 2, and it looks like what was a Striker and an MRAP that have already been either completely knocked out or disabled. So as many of you know, Ukraine has received a number of Leopard 2s, U.S. Striker armored personnel carriers, along with a lot of MRAP, which is basically like an armored truck. And real quick, I'm pulling this up off screen. I'm going to have it on screen for you guys. If you haven't already noticed, I've started editing videos again. It's actually not an MRAP. It's an International Max Pro. which is I believe also made by the U.S. But these two vehicles were involved in an off-road or an on-road collision. Looks like a highway collision. Both vehicles were pretty messed up. Will likely be repaired. I mean, this is military equipment. It's loaded up with sophisticated stuff. So the International Max Pro might be totaled. They might have to get a new one of those. The Striker probably is not, but is definitely pretty heavily damaged. In terms of the Leopard 2, this one is really fascinating. There's pictures have showed up from a Leopard 2 that the Ukrainians were training with in Poland, and the turret has been completely ripped off of the tank, completely ripped off. And this is no easy repair. I mean, it's certainly the type of thing that the Germans will try to repair for the Ukrainians, but there's definitely some components here that are going to have to be replaced. A lot of the work is going to need to be done to this tank. It's not as bad as if it were destroyed per se. But apparently what happened here is two tanks were going by each other, and the turret of this Leopard 2 clipped another Leopard tank, and it completely ripped the turret off. I guess it was going too fast, or something. And this is pretty bad news for the Ukrainians, if you ask me. And it's not, if it was just one vehicle, you might want to, kind of discount this and say like, all right, well, this doesn't really mean anything. It's one vehicle, but it's three different vehicles around the same time. It's tough to say that happened the same day. Who knows when this happened? And probably wasn't at the same time that these pictures were published, but it gives you the sense that a lot of this equipment is not easy to operate. Western operators, such as whether it's U.S. tankers on M1 Abrams, or if it's German tankers or European tankers operating these Leopard 2s, they end up training on these things for years and years before they end up mastering them and being effective piloting them in combat. And the Ukrainians that are running these things are only getting a couple weeks or a couple months of training, and that I believe that kind of shows when you start to see a lot of these different vehicles are getting in basically wrecks, like car accidents, and this is all operator error type stuff, like two vehicles colliding on the highway or two tanks colliding in the middle of a field, ruining a tank. That's definitely operator error. It's something to look out for in the coming spring offensive. Now, I would guess that some steps are going to be taken by the Ukrainians to try and mitigate this in the future, but nevertheless, this is something that happened. All right, so real quick, we are going to go through the frontline updates. Let's look and see at the time. We're at about 13 minutes, so we're going to go through the frontline updates. I'm going to let you guys know exactly what is happening where. So we have a Russian attack, a Russian assault attempt on the town of Snikivka right here. Let's see here. We probably want to do like the sword crossing icon, right? The fencing icon. And we'll make that red. So we have a Russian assault attempt here that, we haven't got any word on the success or failure of. Probably likely failed. We also have a Russian assault attempt to the north of Sporne. So in this area here. This is both of these are reported by the Ukrainians. So in the area of Sporne, I guess we should do the fencing there. Or they said specifically north of Sporne, and there actually is some video footage out of Russian shelling in this area. Some people are saying that the Russians have activated their assault troops in the area. I tend to be skeptical of a lot of that information, especially if there's no proof of any ground that's being captured, whether it's drone footage or announcements of different towns switching hands. Then it's all hearsay, but it's worth marking on the map if you ask me. and the area south of Chasiv Yar. Of course, this is a report from the Ukrainian side about Russian assault attempts in the area of Predtekny, and I guess this is probably some kind of Russian counterattack to try and recapture their positions that they lost across the canal. I doubt that that was successful, but who knows? We're still going to mark it anyways and say that this is where the Russian attacks were. We also have in the area of Avdiivka quite a bit of interesting activity. We have a Russian assault attempt in the direction of Karamak. So I'm guessing that was probably somewhere around right here. Or this is at least what's marked on the live UA map. We also have this is where Zelensky visited the front line. The news is saying that he visited Avdiivka. I would guess that that's probably not true. He probably, if he was pretty close to the front, visited one of the supply towns in the rear. Because Avdiivka is for the most part in a semi-encirclement, and I'm not saying that Zelensky's not brave enough to show up on the front line or this or that. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm saying that he's an important figure. His security is paramount. And visiting inside of Avdiivka, especially with the kind of bombardment it's been taking, is an extremely big risk. I mean, the Russians, even if they don't know he's there, he could just randomly get hit by artillery or some kind of glide bomb or something like that that's being dropped on Avdiivka constantly. I would guess that he probably visited this town of Oxcherny, or perhaps something a little, even further in the rear, some kind of supply town like Novogradovivka, or wherever the local command structure is stationed. On top of that, to the south here, we have Russian assault attempts on Severny. So, that's pretty typical of the last couple of weeks. The Russians have been trying to attack in this area. Also, Russian assault attempts near Pervomaysk in this area here. And then Russian assault attempts on Marinka and its surroundings. So that is where the Russian attacks are for today. As you can see, pretty consistently where they have been over the last couple of months. Now, to talk about one Ukrainian attack, we are getting reports from the Russian side that the Ukrainians launched an assault attempt on their positions near Pavlovka. So right here, as well as on their positions near towards Mikhailsky and the dachas that they currently occupy just south of Vuhledar. So here as well. So these are the two areas that you could see Ukraine is attempting their assaults, as well as, of course, we will mark right here as well. And I guess we can make this one a little bit bigger because it was successful. So finally, the last thing we are going to look at is the visit of Vladimir Putin to the front lines. We talked about how Zelensky had visited the area of Avdiivka. So Vladimir Putin visited the new Russian capital of the Kherson region, or Russian-occupied Kherson region, which is Hinishevsk. It's this small town. It's a semi-port town, I guess you can say. It doesn't really have a notable port in it that's capable of doing a lot. Just basically fishing trawlers and stuff like that. Maybe a little bit of more of a commercial port down here to the south. But nevertheless, this is the new Russian capital. One of the reasons why it is the capital is because it's out of potential range of Ukrainian HIMARS systems, and basically completely out of range. There are some indications that there's some strikes going on in Armyansk, which is here, but there's no real clear evidence that those are specifically HIMARS missiles that are doing that. It could be Ukrainian drones, like Strig drones, or Ukrainian uh, ballistic missiles. Can't remember what they're called. Tochka U. Perhaps, maybe. My understanding was that both locations were actually, both of the entrances to the Crimea were actually beyond Ukrainian reach. So like this area and this area, but recently the Ukrainians have been striking a little bit in this area. So Putin visited Hinishevsk, where he attended a meeting where he got some frontline updates on the whole front line in general, the situation going on there. He talked to an airborne commander, which apparently put together a comprehensive report of everything going on from the Russian perspective, as well as this General Lapin that we hear so much about, which gave an update on the situation in Lugansk. They say after he visited Hinishevsk, he then flew to Lugansk to attend another meeting, and they say that this was the first time Putin had actually visited Lugansk as well. All right, guys, that is it for me today. Do not forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.